Welcome to another episode of Ask the Experts. My name is Audrey. I'm a technical customer success manager here at Honeycomb. And today joining me is our special guest and Honeycomb expert, Chris Bertinato, who is a system architect at NS1. In the market, we've heard a few people say that Honeycomb pricing isn't necessarily scalable. There's this idea that you have to sample quite heavily in order to stay within cost restrictions and get your system up and running in Honeycomb. What do you say to teams like that?
Well, if we're concerned about the event-based pricing model and sampling, it'd be good for us to ask ourselves a question, which is how do we use the telemetry? And so we can talk about this, I think, in two categories that essentially encompasses all of the use cases. So the first one, let's say, is security and compliance. And then the second category encompasses troubleshooting as well as proactive investigations or proactive searches. Now, if we consider the first one, security and compliance, we can look a little deeper into understand how we use that data. So security and compliance audits are one way, and another way that sort of comes to mind almost immediately is our sort of ad hoc security related questions or queries that we make. So in the case of audits, those happen fairly predictably and usually on a fairly long time scale, 6 months to a year or so, when we have to renew compliance and security audits. And for ad hoc security stuff, that can be, again, ad hoc, but also it's usually after the fact. And so the urgency to get the data is not usually immediate. And so what I think this points to is that solutions, to give an example, like AWS Athena and S3 are kind of better suited for this kind of thing because it can be cheaper. You could put logs that you're not going to see for a long time in cold storage and things of that sort. So all this to say that Honeycomb doesn't need to be, and in fact probably shouldn't be, the thing you use to do security and compliance audits. For security and compliance related logs and data, that needs to be full fidelity, and so you can't really sample it. And also the ways we query it are different than the ways we would query and what the questions we ask of data that we use for troubleshooting and things of that sort. So again, so security and compliance related queries are more straightforward. We're usually just listing events and providing some kind of product to an auditor. And if you are doing filtering, it's usually fairly basic. So all that to say that Honeycomb is not really a place for that kind of thing. And so if we go look at the second category, which is troubleshooting and proactive searches and investigation, again, we can introspect and ask ourselves, do we really need all the data? Because that's the assumption is that we do. But if we, for example, if we were to bucket all events in terms of good and bad or error, not error, the errors are usually the more interesting things, especially when we're troubleshooting something. So that's fine, keep all your errors. And the good stuff is not something we're gonna really look at in detail. At least every event is not all that interesting. So things we might do with good data are like performance optimizations, performance troubleshooting, proactive stuff for the most part. And so we don't really need all of it. Sample data sets can do a lot for us for those kinds of queries and questions. So I would say in general, we should think about sampling not as a concession, but rather as a boon. Like we get tons of events every day, and we don't look at most of them. So sampling is a necessity, but not because of the pricing model, but because we can't really handle all of that data. And if you think you can, just because you're running our infrastructure on premises, well, I would encourage you to look at how you have to provision those instances to do it, because it's still costing you. It's just in a different way. So we don't really need all of the stuff, and it puts a drag on all of our systems, frankly, and we don't use it. So sampling is the friend. Actually, it's not just something we have to do in order to keep costs under control. So to sum it up, turn it all around and really think about how we really have to think about how we use our telemetry and whether or not how we ask questions of it. So that will indicate what needs to go into Honeycomb, what can go elsewhere. And generally speaking, sampling is our friend, and there are intelligent ways to do it. It's not just straightforward, cut some things out. You can be pretty precise about it. So it's not really as big of a problem as it seems to be.